ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Retro Warriors, episode 379. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Saturn, we're recording on a Wednesday.
Yeah, that's weird.
It's very strange.
And we flip-flop the topic moments before recording, too.
Well, that's only upsetting to you because this is the topic I was prepared for. So we're going to do yours tomorrow night.
It'll be fine. It's all fine.
It's probably fine, I guess. As far as housekeeping, Guy's here, so stay tuned after the ending theme for the after party with Guy, where he will be here to discuss
The regular party.
The regular party that we attended. My week.
Yes, sir.
I finally beat Doom Eternal.
Or Doom Eternal.
Doom Eternal,
Yeah.
which is what my dictation wants to call it. I finally beat Doom Eternal, and what a game, what a campaign. It took me about 15 hours, I think. I think it was like 14 hours and some change. Like it's lengthy. Now, granted, I was getting every collectible I could find.
Yeah.
Because you know how I am about collectibles. I just love them.
Yeah, that's totally your wheelhouse.
I just love them so much. No, I like it. Well, so the collectibles in the game are, you can get music from various id games, which is cool. And there's like Quake music and Commander Keen and stuff. You can find floppy disks that contain cheat codes that you can activate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can find like little toy versions of some of the monsters, which are cute. And like, so it's like, I like collecting this stuff because it's not just like, hey, you collected all of the MacGuffins and you get an achievement. Like it gives me a thing. It's an actual unlockable. And it was, it was a really good campaign. I'm kind of shocked at how much of a 180 I've done on Doom Eternal. Because the first time I played it, it was like, it was too much. I put the game down. It was just...
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that you were overwhelmed by it.
It was just too frantic for my brain. And I don't know what... Well, I do know what changed is this time I'm playing on Steam Deck, and having 4 additional buttons on the back of it makes all the difference in the world. Right. Like in frantic moments on a regular controller, things are happening so fast that sometimes I'm pushing the left bumper with my thumb. Like I'm pushing just the combination of buttons I'm having to push in the order I'm having to push them. I'm doing weird things to hit them while holding a different button. So it's like I'll be firing a weapon with my both triggers. I'll need both triggers to fire whatever weapon. And then I also want to do a grenade while I'm firing. So I have to take my thumb off my joystick and push it up and push my bumper with it.
That's all way too many buttons for me. I can't do any of that.
It's insane. I mean, talk about a game that uses the whole controller. I mean, every button. And so having those 4 buttons on the back has really made a huge difference because I can keep my hands static and I can easily reprogram. And I got all the way through the campaign and it was just a blast. I've already started on the first DLC pack, the Ancient Gods. And it's more Doom. It's great. You shoot bad guys, and it's fun.
I believe you that it is more Doom.
And once you beat the campaign, you can go back through with cheats on, which
you get even more Doom.
And you get even more Doom. It's just Doom all the way down. And I really enjoy single player FPS campaigns, and that's a hard thing to enjoy. It's kind of like enjoying tournament fighter campaigns. Yeah. Like a lot of times you're just not going to get it. And a lot of properties seem to be moving away from the campaigns. Right. But I like them. And it's a really good one. It's like if you're in the market for just a good single player FPS with a solid long campaign, well, long for an FPS, then it's a great one. I had such a blast with it.
That's good.
I'm still doing the Monster Hunter Rise.
Yeah.
I'm still risen? I'm rising currently.
Oh, good.
I've made it to the high rank quests, which are the same, but they're harder now. You see,
yeah, right.
And it kind of does that MMO thing where when you hit high rank, all of a sudden it's like your gear kind of resets. You get high rank versions of all of the gear. Yeah. So suddenly you're back in like the low tier, shitty looking armor, but it's the high rank version of it. Yeah. You know, so I'm going through that particular growing pain right
and
now.
also where it reuses old content but just makes it harder.
Yeah, it's doing a little bit of that. To the game's credit, it is mixing in a lot of monsters and quest types and combinations that do not exist in the lower ranks.
Right.
But that's still a,
That's how most of the MMOs do it too. When they have the harder version of a boss or a harder version of a dungeon or whatever, it usually adds in new mechanics that were never there previously, just to make it significantly more challenging. So it's still interesting.
And I mean, to be fair, at the end of the day, Monster Hunter is just the game is about hunting these monsters over and over and over again.
Oh, you hunt monsters in it. God.
Yeah, I know. It's just
I'm gonna write that
shocking. I was a little annoyed. Andrew was over at my house, and he brought his deck, and I was like, "Hey, let's play Rise together."
I touched your decks together,
and we touched our decks together. We had a deck party.
All right,
and I sit down and I'm like, "All right, well, we'll just play local multiplayer because on the Switch it has local multiplayer.
Right.
The Steam version does not have local multiplayer.
That's some bullshit."
And I was like, well, that's annoying. And then we're playing online, and immediately we get into a lobby and everything, and he has a communication error, and we drop out of the lobby. And I'm just fucking frustrated. I'm like, it's in the Switch version.
Yeah.
You have the technology.
Right.
But they didn't. It's just not there.
I don't know why so many companies take away local multiplayer from PC ports of games. Like, I understand not too many people play local multiplayer or split screen on a PC, but just leave the option in there.
Well, we're not playing split screen. We're playing LAN. Is what we want. There is no split screen in Monster Hunter.
That's even worse.
I know it's even worse.
But I still think that there should be more split screen in PC games. And there should absolutely be local LAN play in every game, period. Unless it is an MMO, there should be LAN play if it supports multiplayer.
Yeah, so still playing lots of Monster Hunter Rise. I'm spending most of my time hiring cats and dogs.
Like you do. In real life or in the game?
In the game.
Oh, okay, good.
In real life, they don't make great employees.
Right, but sometimes you need to get rid of some mice or some kids.
I think I have about 13 cats and maybe 10 dogs.
In real life or in the game?
In the game.
Okay.
And they're doing all their various training and wearing armor and learning to fight by putting a sword in their mouth and attacking things with it. And it's just the cutest thing in the world.
It's very important cat business.
Also, there's weird event DLC. They had Sonic the Hedgehog DLC.
I was reading about that.
Now I can dress my cat up as Sonic the Hedgehog, and I can dress my dog up as Tails or Amaterasu from Okami for some reason.
In the game or in real life?
In the game.
Oh, damn.
Is this going to be a thing? But that's about it. Lots of Monster Hunter, lots of Doom Eternal. That has just kind of been what I've been mainlining, all on my deck.
I'm just sitting here thinking about your cat dressed as Sonic and your dog dressed as Amaterasu.
It wouldn't be nearly as cute as it is in the game. They would be very upset.
I don't know. Ralph dressed up as Amaterasu would be pretty great. Anyway.
Yeah. What have you been up to?
So a couple weeks ago, I talked about Agalos, right?
Yes. You mentioned you were playing it, and it was pretty good.
Yeah. So I would like to take a moment to gush about it now, because it went from pretty good to pretty great.
Oh, it's been on my list for a long time now. Maybe I'll buy it.
I think you should, because it is this wonderful blend of like Wonder Boy and Zelda 2. And it is so well constructed. And the only possible complaint I could have about it is that there are times when it is a little confusing to know where you should go next. However, there is a fortune teller near the beginning of the game that will just tell you for free. So if you get lost, you just go talk to him, and he's like, go to this town and then move left.
God, I wish every game had that.
Right?
I get lost all of the time.
And then you just go to that town, you move left, and maybe you won't immediately find what you're after, but you're probably going to find what you're after.
Whatever like mental block you have that makes it difficult for you to process 3D spaces, I have that for 2D spaces. I never know where to go.
Yeah,
I'm perpetually confused.
And that is okay. So that's one other niggling complaint I will have about that game, is that it does have no in-game map. Well, no useful in-game map.
Oh goodness.
So, but the world isn't super big, and again, you get that help. almost at the very beginning, and you get an ability to teleport not long after that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really
that's not too bad.
Yeah, it helps make up for that. And it does have Zelda 2-like combat abilities like the up thrust and down thrust and things like that. And so combat feels a little more sophisticated than in Wonder Boy. But the rest of the general gameplay, the exploration, the navigation, the world building feels more Wonder Boy than it does Zelda.
Well, I just bought it, so
Excellent. I've done my job here.
what else should I buy, Saturn? Just give me a list.
All the things. It's just look at my wish list on Steam and buy all of those. But then when it says for yourself or as a gift, make sure you hit gift because that's important.
And then I can come over anytime and play it whenever I want.
I'll just add you to my Steam family.
Great. Yeah. Because Steam family isn't a mess. What a mess.
Right.
What a mess. I don't know if you ever had to mess with any of that, but it sucks.
I tried it with my old roommate, and man, that was garbage. That was just hot garbage.
Yeah.
But no, that's I've had very little time to play games in the last couple of weeks, so that's been the one that I've really wanted to make sure to mention because man,
I'm glad it turned out good.
Oh yeah.
Because you had started it and you were like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, damn, I was really hoping he'd be much more excited. Because I think I'm the one that was like, have you heard about this thing?
Yeah. I started kind of lukewarm on it because I had seen it like pop up in my suggestions on both Xbox and on Steam a couple of times. And I think on Switch too. And was like, maybe, whatever. It's just another 8-bit style game. And then you recommended it, and I was like, maybe. And then somebody in our Discord recommended it, and I was like, all right, I should probably get that. And then somebody said, oh, also it's on sale for $3 now. I was like, all right, well, I guess if I gotta. And I did start a little lukewarm on it, which is kind of dumb since it was $3 fucking. I should have really factored
I paid
that
more
in.
than that, so my hopes are high.
Yeah.
It's not on sale right now.
Well, you failed. No, it was good though. I'm really enjoying it. I'm very near the end at this point, and I am suddenly discovering there was a lot of hidden stuff that I missed that I'm going back for now, and it's good. I'm liking it.
I'm looking for something to fill that Infernax shaped hole in my heart. Nothing has quite grabbed me like Infernax did.
It's not quite as dark or as funny as Infernax, but I feel like gameplay-wise, it scratches a lot of that same itch for me. It doesn't have the cheats, though.
Well, it's fine. I'm on PC. I'll figure it out.
Right.
Let's do some news.
All right.
First up, Steam and Nintendo are both starting to crack down on some adult games.
Oh, no.
But different ones for different reasons.
Yeah.
So if you are a fan of adult games, pay close attention if you're looking to buy a system sometime soon.
Right.
So Steam blocked a title that took place in a school environment.
But Nintendo was cool with that. It was like, oh, you want to have an adult game featuring high school kids? Go to town.
Yeah, they're like, great job, Japan. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Nintendo will no longer allow titles with quote, uncensored female breasts. Which is just...
It's the scientific terminology.
Goofiest way to phrase that.
It sounds like you're in a lab about to dissect something.
I mean, it's not like I expected Doug Bowser to come out and be like, oh, no titties anymore. It's just such a clinical way to describe it. That
things you cannot have in your games anymore. Nazi violence, boobies.
Yeah, none of them. No boobs. Get that out of here. Take that to Sega.
You want to play your Night Trap? You go to Sega.
You just take that on over to the Sega CD. They like that kind of thing over there. Not in my Nintendo.
Get your boobies over there.
There were no boobies in Night Trap.
I don't know why that's how Doug Bowser sounds now. That's not at all how he sounds.
It's. I've been working on that impression, so I'm confident it's pretty accurate, having never heard him speak.
Well, it's not how he sounds, but perfect. Done.
The development team behind Disco Elysium has been dismissed from their company.
Yeah, that's really depressing.
So, from what I understand, and it's very little, the creative forces at the company that produced Disco Elysium have been ejected out the cargo bay door.
Yeah, and it was a company that they founded too.
Yeah. And the indication is that they're going to keep making Disco Elysium, possibly Disco Elysium 2, but it is not going to be from those same people, and it's probably going to be real scummy and shitty and not good. So,
and like, personally, I'm not particularly interested in Disco Elysium. It's not my kind of game. It's not directed towards me, but I've heard nothing but praise about it. And so it is very sad to hear that an indie team that made something that is pretty much universally praised was just kicked out by the bean counters. That's shitty.
Yeah. I didn't like the game whatsoever. But I have a close friend of mine. He is obsessed with it. He's like, this is a life-changing game. He like made his girlfriend play it. He's like, he bought my copy because I was like, because, it's one of those things where it's like, got like 115% on Metacritic or whatever.
Right, yeah.
And I was like, I'm interested just because it's supposed to be so good, but I really don't think I like that kind of game.
Yeah.
And he bought me a copy so that I could try it.
Absolutely not its target demographic.
Yeah.
But several people in our Discord have said, like, oh, it's my favorite game in years. It's the best written game in years.
I've heard many claims of best game of all time. Multiple claims from not small sources.
Right.
So it sucks to see this happen.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
It's a real shame.
Hopefully that creative team goes on and either gets on somewhere else or starts their own company and basically makes the spiritual successor to Disco Elysium.
You mean starts their own company again,
and then maybe makes better decisions about who they put in charge of things this second time around.
That's unfortunate.
A GameCube development kit was discovered that has an early build of the Wii system menu installed.
This is exciting to me. I love prototype stuff like this. I love it. So you remember the big Nintendo leak last year or the year before, whenever that was?
Yeah.
So among the things that were leaked was this really early Wii system menu. Like, I think it was like version 0.1 or something.
Yeah.
And it has no GUI. It's all text. And it's controlled with a GameCube controller, despite the fact that it has options for like calibrating Wii remotes and stuff.
Right.
And so it's just a really early build, and people were trying to find ways to get it to work on the Wii, and it couldn't happen. You couldn't make it do it. They were able to get it to load in Dolphin just as a proof of concept, but they couldn't get it to, I believe anyway, if I remember reading right, that they were at least able to get it to load in Dolphin, but they couldn't get it to load on a Wii itself. And they were trying to figure out, like, maybe the hardware was different, and now it finally turns up on a GameCube. And that's great to me. I love that.
I don't know if we've talked about it, but we've done episodes on the Wii and the Virtual Console, I'm sure. Yeah. I don't know if we've ever talked about how fantastically smart and well-designed the Wii UI was.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it's not fucking usable. It's not usable for anyone that wants to, like, do some real gaming.
Right.
Whatsoever.
But for introducing new users.
Yeah. Like, holy shit. What a genius UI.
It's just a bunch of channels, man.
Just don't buy too many games, because then you're fucked. And it's going to take forever to organize that shit.
Right. You'll have to dump them all onto an SD card, and then you have to start using the SD card menu, and that takes forever.
Only Nintendo would make a system that successful, and one of its fatal flaws was that they didn't think you'd buy that many games.
Yeah. It's almost as if Nintendo doesn't want to implement folders into their UI, which fortunately they got over that, right?
Yeah, they did it on the Wii U and the 3DS, and then I assume whatever came after those has folders, because Wii U and 3DS, you could have folders and put little special icons on them.
Yeah, they're cute. I have a little 8-bit Mario icon on my Virtual Console folder.
I'm sure the Switch has folders.
Yeah, probably. Sure.
I could see Nintendo coming out with some dumb excuse of like, well, we want people's software to be displayed because it creates value, like some dumb Nintendo excuse.
Didn't they recently implement some kind of like quasi folders?
They did, and they did, and I don't remember how they did it, but it was so shitty that it's useless.
Yeah, it was very, very cumbersome.
Just salt in the wound.
Right.
No boobies, no uncensored female breasts, no folders. That's their two rules.
That's the rules of Nintendo.
Also, no making enough of anything for people to get it. None of that.
Unless you want the Zelda Game & Watch. That's still down at the Target down there.
Yeah, go buy you one, because it's everywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
PS5 console successfully hacked.
Nice.
So don't update it if you wanna. If you wanna hack
I already
it.
did.
No, Saturn.
No. Actually, it was the hack was on several firmware versions before the one that mine had by the time it was announced, so it was already way too late for me. But
Yeah.
So for people buying them new right now, maybe check to see what firmware it has.
Yeah. Activision Blizzard really fucked up Overwatch 2 and its launch. So the first game was fully shut down.
Right. And what's best is they just changed that SKU into Overwatch 2 on every digital marketplace. So if you owned the game, if you had purchased it on Switch or PS4 or Xbox, now you have the second one, which is free to play, and you no longer have the game you purchased.
Yes. First one's gone.
Yeah.
It's dead. They killed it. So fuck preservation.
Yeah.
The second game was immediately overwhelmed by DDoS attacks, presumably by pissed off people who were upset that they took the game that they paid money for away.
Right. And even before it was confirmed there were the DDoS attacks, it was still just overwhelmed. Like their servers weren't equipped for enough people, and there was like 45-minute plus waits just to get into a round.
I was asking Andrew a few days into it. I was like, "How's it going?" He's like, "Oh, you still got it. There's still wait queues." And I'm like, "It's a Activision Blizzard online shooter. Why are there wait queues?" Right. Players were required to have postpaid cell phone plans to log in. So for a while there, if you had a prepaid cell phone, you couldn't even make an account because you had to put a phone number on it that was not a prepaid.
And if you had purchased the first game and had your purchased game forcibly upgraded to the new one, you couldn't play it if you had a prepaid phone. So even though you paid for a game, you weren't allowed to play it because you weren't paying enough for your phone.
And some players were forced into buying cosmetics, presumably through some kind of marketplace error.
Yeah.
But that also happened on the first game, if memory serves. So fucking fix it. Just stop doing it.
They removed the loot boxes. That's good, right?
And they withheld raises from employees who voted to join a union, according to a investigation by a third-party body.
Yeah, good job, Activision Blizzard.
So,
what a shit garbage company Activision Blizzard continues to be.
I'll say this: people that are playing it, they're like, "Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's more Overwatch." Like that. That's what I'm hearing. Is there? Nobody's like, "Oh, it's so much better." It's everyone's like, "Yeah, it's more Overwatch."
Yeah.
So, how do you fuck this up this bad?
What, do you guys not have phones?
What upsets me too is that Overwatch was a big fucking deal when it came out.
Yeah.
It was a big deal for a while, real big, and they just murdered the first game.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I keep forgetting that Overwatch existed until this happened.
Yeah.
It was, in my mind, Blizzard was still just Warcraft, StarCraft, Diablo, nothing else.
Well, Overwatch came out and it didn't invent, but it mainstreamed the idea of the hero shooter. Everyone was all abuzz about hero shooters after it came out. And all of a sudden, all these companies were working on their own hero shooters.
Oh, is that those games that you can find at the dollar store? They have like 100 copies, but it turns out the server's already shut down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the ones.
All right.
Which it's a cool idea, competitive online FPS, but you play very distinct, different characters that are all very different from one another.
Sounds
that's
like Team Fortress 2.
Yeah, kind of Team Fortress 2E. Yeah, for sure. But yeah. Anyway, they fucked it up.
Yeah.
So
Good job, Activision Blizzard.
Fandom, formerly Wikia, has acquired the former catalog of CBS Interactive from Red Ventures, including GameSpot, Metacritic, Giant Bomb, and GameFAQs. And I don't know if anyone has ever had the displeasure of needing to find information on a fandom website.
Oh,
But if you have, then you're also upset at this.
Yeah, because all information that is not on GameFAQs has moved to fandom's websites. And their websites are such ad-ridden, auto video playing garbage that they're almost unusable, especially on mobile. They're completely unusable on mobile.
What's frustrating is I have a pie hole, so it blocks all the ads, but it's so infested with them that it breaks the fucking website.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't work right.
On my pie hole, I still have to see the autoplay video half the time. And it's like just an advertisement for another one of their pages. And when you pull up their search, it suggests that you search their other wikis instead of the one you're actually on.
Good job.
That's not helpful.
No. Game Gear Micro hacked, allowing ROMs to be loaded. So Pablo, there you go. You can hack your Game Gear Micro. And hobbyists have made an OS for the NES, which is just as cute as a button.
Right. It doesn't do much.
It's cute.
Yeah.
Canceled GBA Dune game has released on Steam under the name Elend the Crystal Wars.
Well, they couldn't use the Dune license.
Kind of bizarre, you know. Super Mario Brothers movie trailer released. Mario's ass has been reduced. We got our first introduction to the voice cast, and the general consensus is Chris Pratt just sounds like Chris Pratt. Everyone else seems like it's probably pretty good, but we only heard a few seconds. That seems to be
the art looks amazing, though.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I've had many people ask me what, like, if I'm excited for it, what do I think? I'm like, Illumination makes good kids films. Like, it's going to be a solid B+ movie.
Right.
Out the door, easy peasy.
Right.
Pilot Wings 64 has been added to Nintendo Switch Online Plus.
Yep.
And and finally, the Garbage Pail Kids are getting a new 8-bit style game for modern consoles and the NES.
Yeah.
Who asked for this?
So you're a little bit younger than me.
I am. I'm aware of Garbage Pail Kids.
So you probably missed the height of Garbage Pail Kids.
I did miss the height. Now, by the time I came around, Garbage Pail Kids were that thing that you'd see a weird sticker on the bottom of a slide at a park somewhere, and it'd be all torn up and shit. And you'd be like, what is that weird fucking Cabbage Patch Baby looking thing?
Yeah, I remember begging to get an additional pack of Garbage Pail Kids when we would go to the Eckards or to... in the off chance we got to go to like an actual comic store or a mall or something, there would always be at least one or two stores that would sell Garbage Pail Kids.
Now, I don't know if you know this, they still make and sell them.
Yeah, but
I think it's honestly the same ones that they've had from back then. Just Highlights magazine style recycled back.
I've heard there are a few new ones that were added recently, but yeah, good. it was and there were also variants back then where you would get the exact same kid that your friend got, but it had a different, stupider name on it. And so you would get to like compare who had the dumber name.
It's like a different angle on the same joke.
Yeah, it would be the exact same art, but just like a different bad pun.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was a thing for a little while there. We were like trying to figure out who had the grossest Garbage Pail Kids. And naturally you would put the stickers of them all over your shelves or all over your binders.
Well, I was going to ask that. Was it we collect them and they go in like a trading card binder, or is it like you just slap the shit wherever you want?
I put mine in a binder, but I didn't like put the cards in the binder. I put the stickers in a binder. Like I had a sticker photo album. Yeah. And I would put them all in there. And that way
so it's a little sticker book.
School. Yeah, basically. Yeah. And I could show them off at school. I could bring them up there. It was a fucking thing for a while there. And then the movie came out, and everyone I knew like lost interest shortly after the movie came out.
That movie is in bad movie circles. Yeah. It's talked about. It is a famously bad movie with famously horrific special effects.
Oh yeah, it was a bad movie.
It's a mess.
That seemed to be the peak as far as I know. And I don't even think it's when the movie came out. I think it's when it came to video rental stores.
Yeah.
Because nobody went to the theater to see it that I knew. So it wasn't until it came to video rental stores and you finally got to rent the Garbage Pail Kids movie and you're like, never mind.
Yeah. No, I'm good. I throw that binder in the trash.
No, what if I needed to go look at Shaggy Annie again?
Yeah, what if some of those old ones, they sell for some money now. Yeah. You could have had some top dollar Garbage Pail Kids Saturn.
Nah, I'm good.
Which brings us to our topic at hand.
Does
this week, unfortunately, yeah, it does. This week we're talking about the evolution of the first-person shooter genre. As far as synopsis, it starts with mostly shooting Nazis, then evolves into shooting some more Nazis. That's just kind of where first-person shooter games have gone.
Yeah.
As far as scope, this is a really hard one because this genre is gargantuan.
It's a really hard one for me because I struggle to see the difference in most of it. So I am really glad that you're here to explain this to me, because I'm the one who needs this explanation.
So as far as scope, we're going to talk about some early kind of proto examples, and then we're just by necessity, because we can't make this a 10-part series. Well, we could. Saturn would quit, but we could. We have to talk about the genre in broad terms not long after that.
Well, fortunately, there's been no evolution in the genre from like 1997, right? Like from there to today is pretty much the same.
You know, you make that joke, but there are blocks where nothing changed. But most of them are past the scope of this show. Right. We're kind of cutting it off pre-Halo.
Yeah, there was the Halo block, the Medal of Honor block, and then the Call of Duty block.
So I'm cutting it off this is all pre-Halo, because when you enter that world, everything changes radically. It's just a whole separate episode. So this is mostly early examples, pixel shooters, their evolution into polygonal shooters. And I want to start with what I found to be the earliest examples of first-person shooter games.
Yeah. They're really first-person games.
No, they're shooters.
Right, but
you're shooting stuff.
It's still your earliest first-person games, regardless.
True. I think it's true. Yeah. It's possibly true. So there is some debate over which game came first, Maze, or I think it's supposed to be pronounced Space Sim, like Space Sim, but it's SPASIM. Yeah. I was calling it Spasm for like a day, and then I was like, no, wait. Word. Yeah, I was like, no, they're in space. It's Space Sim, but it's they didn't spell it right.
Right. Yeah, they messed up that spelling.
So Maze was initially developed in 1973 by high school kids during a study program at the NASA Ames Research Center.
That's the most 1973 game development story I've ever heard in my life.
It sounds like the plot to a Spielberg movie from the mid-'80s, doesn't it?
Right.
Which means we can technically say that NASA is responsible for all video game violence. So
that's true.
If anyone wants to pin that anywhere, there you go. So this was developed for the originally, I believe it was the PDS-1, and it was ported to the PDP-10 and the Xerox Star, which are much more famous examples of big mainframe computers. Yeah. But the PDS-1 was the original version, the 1973 version that these high school kids put together. It was Steve Coley, Greg Thompson, Howard Palmer, all working as teenagers.
Right. In the early 70s on a video game.
On a video game.
Right. And this is a year past Pong at this point. So we're...
Yeah.
And granted, Space War already existed. So It's not like this is the earliest games, but this is very early in games.
Yeah, I mean, it's straight just vector-drawn graphics. Right. I don't even know. They're probably not technically vector, but whenever I look at them, I'm like, that looks like vector graphics. You know, I'm not technically inclined on the graphics front, but if I were to describe it, it was a 2-player game. It required a serial connection, and it was real super primitive. It was.
So I'm looking at the PDS-1 version, and I believe that is definitively vector graphics.
Is it? Okay, good.
Yeah,
good.
Because
good.
I don't believe any raster monitor of the 70s could produce that.
I wanted to say that, but I don't know enough about graphics because I was born past the age where I needed to know the difference between VGA and CGA.
Oh,
so
right.
Yeah.
God.
So,
no.
So I never EGA. I don't have to know what any of that fucking shit is.
Yeah, it's color graphics adapter, enhanced graphics adapter, video graphics adapter.
Thank you, Grandpa. So it was a really primitive game. It was kind of static movement. It was done a square at a time, kind of like a first-person dungeon crawler type thing. Yeah. Shooting an opponent gained you 10 points, and getting shot lost you 5 points.
Just like in real life.
Yep, and that's basically it. It's just a maze, and you just move one square at a time, shooting at each other.
Yeah.
It was quickly modified. The MIT version, that was the PDP-10 version, the Xerox Star version, were both modified. They're very different. They have slightly different feature sets. One of them, I think, included like vertical movement of some kind, and then they took it out because it was confusing. They just... this was not a packaged product. This was a thing that grew up in the early computing days in educational environments and just got passed around between campuses.
Yeah.
But yeah,
which is how a lot of those early games.
Yeah, were. Tons of them. Yeah. So it very much was kind of a it was the first FPS as far as I can find. And then we get Space Sim, which is also credited as the first FPS.
Yeah. Well, they're both simultaneously the first FPS.
I think some of it is because the development of Maze is very fuzzy. It was very collaborative. It was very, just passing stuff around. Space Sim was a little more. It was a packaged product.
Right. It looks worse though.
It does look a lot worse.
It's much more complicated.
So this was credited to a single person, Jim Bowery, and it was created in March 1974 for the Play-Doh mainframe system. Bowery did get some help from various collaborators, but it's very much largely treated as his game. He made it.
Yeah.
And he was apparently invested enough in the game's legacy as the potential first FPS that at one point he offered a reward for proof that it was not the first FPS game. And I think it was like $500 if anyone could find an earlier FPS game that was put out, or $200 for an earlier game that had, what did they call it? I had to get it off of Wikipedia. That mathematically modeled population versus resource availability and included space resources.
That's such a 1970s game developer phrase right there.
Uncensored female breasts. So it's a very Star Trek influenced kind of space sim game.
Right.
There's up to 32 players fighting in teams of 8. The ships and weapons are just very much lifted from Star Trek. It's like phasers and torpedoes and stuff.
Which is how a lot of space-based games were at the time.
Yeah. And it very much deals with a lot of flight-related variables that players need to be aware of. It was kind of a treated as a sort of educational experience about like different flight vectors and variables. And
that's probably why it looks more complicated.
Bowery claims that there was a lot of people playing this at a time. This was very popular.
Because everybody had one of those Play-Doh mainframes at home.
Right, obviously. You had a Play-Doh terminal and just a cable run all the way down to the school.
It's just in your kitchen.
But yeah, he implies that it was pretty popular. There were a lot of groups of people getting together regularly and playing this. Although it's also, like it is first person, but it's also kind of more of a space sim than it is. Like, I don't know that anyone today would look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's an FPS.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, as far as that goes, would we consider Battlezone an early FPS?
Is that that's the tank one, right?
Yeah, it's it was an arcade 1980 that Atari put out. It was because it was first person view, but it was from the viewfinder of a tank, and it was also vector graphics. And as far as the mainstream audience who didn't have access to a mainframe terminal, it might be one of the earliest first person shooting games that people had access to.
I think for the purposes of us looking at the evolution, yes. Were it earlier, maybe. The reason I included Space Sim is because it's so early that we're very much in this proto-FPS phase. Although Maze, when you look at it, you're like, oh yeah, it's an FPS. I'm walking through corridors. I'm shooting a person. Like that. That's, it's there.
Yeah. And then throughout the 80s, we did see plenty of first-person games, but they were usually dungeon crawlers, not anything real-time.
And then I'm going to bump us up a few years.
Yeah.
To the late 80s.
Yes.
Because as you demonstrated with Battlezone, there were some other kind of ideas out there that could be considered first-person shooters. Actually, several of them.
Yeah.
But none of them really kind of fit the mold quite as much as Maze did that I could find. In 1987, we got Midi Maze, also known as Spaceball 2000.
I love this game, damn it. It's bad, first of all, but I love it.
You're just big smiley faces shooting each other.
It's great.
So it's developed by Xanth Software FX, published by Hybrid Arts and Bulletproof Software on the Atari ST. It's pretty much first-person Pac-Man with where you shoot each other, right?
Yeah, basically, it's first person. You're in a maze and you shoot each other. For me, because I played the Super NES port, and I want to say I played the Game Boy port as well. Which the Game Boy port has some butt rock on its title screen, by the way.
Yeah, it was ported to everything.
Oh yeah. But yeah, I played the Super NES version, and it felt like for us it had the same kind of feel as the battle mode in Mario Kart, where you're just like running around trying to hit the other person in a small confined area, with janky early over the shoulder, well in this case first person view. So the controls were janky. The controller wasn't quite built for it. The hardware was struggling to produce it, but you're just in a tiny corridor shooting each other.
Yeah. And it was, I mean, people like it. It was ported to enough things that it had to have been popular enough.
Right. What I love is that the PC version's multiplayer would have people connect to one another via the MIDI interface, which is how it got its name.
Because, the MIDI mace,
Yeah, because there wasn't, like, most people didn't have a network card in the mid 80s. That just wasn't something you would invest in for your computer. You weren't even likely to have a modem, but everybody had the MIDI port, so you could just chain a bunch of MIDI cables together and play Faceball.
Yeah. So yeah, between Space Sim and MIDI Maze, you do get, like you were pointing out, there's some vehicle combat games that you could. I'm not including them. I only included Space Sim because it was so early that you kind of have to. And that brings us to Hover Tank 3D, which is a few years later.
Oh, so this tank game counts.
This tank game counts, but for specific reasons. This was 1991. It was published on DOS, and it was developed by id Software. It's published by Softdisk. And it is very reminiscent of Wolfenstein. 3D, I mean. So the reason I included it here, yes, it is a tank game, but like looking at it, you're like, man, that looks a lot like Wolf 3D, like a whole lot. And it uses ray casting, which this is how my dumb brain explains it. Ray casting is the tech that they use to draw graphics from the focal point of like the player's perspective.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it is basically what makes it look like the enemies are looking at you in these pixel shooters, because they're not polygons, but they rotate with you, so you're always looking at the flat side of them.
I know what you're talking about now.
And on Wikipedia, they say that ray casting is much like ray tracing. And I was like, you're confusing me. Stop.
Yeah.
I'm confused now. Which is the other reason I included Hover Tank 3D. And id Software also followed up Hover Tank 3D in 1991 with Catacomb 3D, which introduced texture mapping to the development toolbox. So Catacomb is also possibly the earliest game to show the player character's hand in the first-person view. And Ultima Underworld would, a year later in 1992, also use that texture mapping technology. Because before this, there was no texture. There was no texture mapping on anything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was just
in
flat
this
colors.
space.
Anytime you tried to do anything even resembling a polygon, you would have to do just flat colors.
Yeah. And so that kind of brings us up to these ideas are starting to get codified.
Yeah.
We're seeing some shooting games. A lot of it is vehicle combat games, stuff that we probably wouldn't consider first-person shooters today.
Right. Even if it was a first-person perspective shooter, it wasn't the same kind of thing as what we call that now.
In the early 90s, we see id putting together the technology that would lead them to Wolfenstein 3D, which was published on DOS 1992. They just lifted it directly from the 1978 Muse software game, Castle Wolfenstein, which was not an FPS.
Right.
Because this was back in the day when you can just be like, yeah, we're going to make a sequel to that game that we don't own or anything. We're just going to do that. We're allowed.
Yeah. Did they not buy the rights or anything?
I didn't see that they did. So it's possible that they did not.
Huh.
I saw no indication of them talking to Muse Software. They're just like, yeah, it's based on Wolfenstein, that old Muse Software game.
It looks like they did purchase the rights.
Okay, good.
I am finding evidence of that. I can't tell if it was before or after release, but they did purchase the rights from the person who ended up with them after Muse Software went
So it's not impossible that they released Wolf 3D and then bought the rights later.
It's not completely impossible.
Wolf 3D was extremely successful and influential. It sold well over expectation. It used ray casting. It used texture mapping. An instant success. Wolfenstein 3D was a mail order DOS game.
Right. Well, all of them. Well, not all of them. Most of them were at the time.
Yeah. And they were getting so many more orders than they were expecting. It outsold what they expected of it instantaneously. Apogee Soft.
It was.
Go ahead.
It was one of those things where because so many PC games at the time were mail order, where you could only find maybe a shareware copy. Otherwise, you just had to read about it in a magazine and order it.
Yeah.
It went completely past my radar. I did not hear about it at all until Doom came out.
So Apogee Software would use the Wolf 3D engine in their game in 1993 called Blake Stone Aliens of Gold,
which they had hear of that one.
Which they had Jam Productions develop for them, which it does feature an auto map, which is, that's cool. It seems like people liked it. It was okay, but it came out like within a week of a game called Doom.
Hey, you left out the other great game that used the Wolfenstein 3D engine.
Oh, what was that?
Super 3D Noah's Ark.
Oh, I didn't leave it out, Saturn. It's in here.
Oh, good.
Don't you worry. So Doom, so Wolfenstein 3D was very much what we would consider today a first-person shooter.
Yes.
It had a lot of the technology that would define the genre for the coming years.
Right.
And it was a commercial success. So it had all the technology. It looked like what it needed to look like, and people wanted it.
Right.
And it perfectly prepared everyone for Doom in 1993, which codified all the ideas and techniques from Hover Tank 3D, Catacomb 3D, Wolfenstein 3D, all into one game.
Yeah.
It to this day remains possibly the most ubiquitous FPS game ever made.
Yeah.
It's still expanded on. It's still getting modded. It still has commercial. Its last commercial release was 2019.
Yeah, and it was ported to Game Pass recently, so it's out there. And also they at the time, like I mentioned, you could maybe find a shareware disc somewhere, and usually shareware discs were like in this loose folio at the front of a computer or software store, and you would just dig through there, find the one you want, pay $2-3 and leave. Doom was one of the few shareware games that I saw that was in a full retail box, and it was still like $5 or $10 for the first episode, and that was as much of the game as you get for that. And then at the end of it, it would just tell you to send them a money order.
Yeah, well, it would kill you first.
Right. Yeah,
it would put you in a room, murder you,
right,
and then go, I guess you suck. You better buy the whole game.
Exactly.
So after release, Doom was making up to $100,000 per day in 1993.
Yeah.
By contrast, id's initial sales expectation for Wolfenstein 3D, which they beat by a wide margin, but their initial expectation for Wolf 3D was $60,000 in the first month.
Yeah.
So they are suddenly Scrooge McDuck swimming in a sea of cash. I mean, Doom is an overnight sensation. Right. It's still installed on everything, everywhere, all of the time. If
Whether
you own
want it to be or not,
it plays Doom. And so Doom really, it was such a major success. It was so ubiquitous, and this is what really kicked off the FPS genre in the early 90s. This is when all of a sudden, because you saw Apogee was making stuff, Wolf 3D had come out, and it was pretty successful, but this was different.
Yeah.
This was now everyone is making one.
Yeah, and it was big enough that we called everything a Doom clone.
Yes. which is why I want to talk about the post-Doom FPS world.
Right.
Everything leading up to now, from 1973 all the way up to Doom, is you can kind of see this direct lineage.
Right. It's the ramp up to Doom.
But post-Doom, it was so influential. The entire FPS genre is pretty much split here, pre-Doom and post-Doom.
Yeah.
And the actual timeline becomes hard to track here because so much software flooded onto the market. Many of them were clones of Doom. Many of them weren't really Doom clones, but looked like Doom.
Yeah.
It was crazy. So we're just going to hit some highlights.
And the definition of Doom clone was pretty fast and loose at the time.
Oh, if it really just meant first-person shooter for years.
Well, not even shooter. If it was vaguely first-person, people were like, oh, that's a Doom clone, only you use a stick.
Yeah, it's a Doom clone, except it's an RPG.
Yeah.
And there's no guns.
Yeah, I absolutely heard people referring to, like, the Elder Scrolls games. It's like, oh, it's like a Doom clone, but it's a role-playing Doom clone.
Yeah. So I want to talk about a couple games that use the actual Doom engine. Which Heretic and Hexen, which were developed by Raven Software, published by id Software a year later, 1994, featured vertical aiming. It had jibs, which is a big feature in shooter games, Saturn. You got to have the jibs.
Oh, is that where you get the bits of the body that explode?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chunks of them fly off.
Yeah, I got
and it had an inventory.
Yeah. Yeah, I played the heck out of Heretic and Hexen.
Yeah, Heretic's a blast. Hexen was a year later. It was not considered a direct sequel. There would be a direct sequel later.
Yeah.
But they both used straight up the Doom engine.
Didn't the box for Hexen say the sequel to Heretic on it?
I think it does, but then they came out with Heretic 2 a few years later.
And it upset me.
So what the fuck?
Because I was like, wait, but I saw the sequel to Heretic. It was sold years ago. I was very upset.
Chex Quest and Chex Quest 2, put out by Digital Cafe in 97, they used the Doom engine.
No, I'm sorry. I said Beyond Heretic on the box. My bad.
Oh, right.
Yeah, totally different.
And then Super Noah's Ark 3D, Wisdom Tree 1994, actually used the Wolfenstein engine. But it had to be on the list somewhere because it's such a piece of shit. It's available on your Super Nintendo. I don't recommend buying it, playing it. Is it on Steam now? That's fantastic.
And I believe it was reprinted physically for some system. I don't remember which one, but I think like LRG or somebody did a physical reprint of Super 3D Noah's Ark.
There's probably a million billion floppy Doom clones floating around out there, undocumented, that nobody's ever heard of or ever seen. But these are just a few highlights that used the same technology. I think Apogee kept doing stuff after Blake Stone 2 within this space. Right. We have to talk about Marathon, which at the time probably was called a Doom clone.
Yeah, and also mostly flew under the radar for anyone that I knew at the time.
It was developed and published in 94 by Bungie on Mac.
That's why.
And while the Marathon games, they were a bit of a footnote in the broader scope of like mid-90s FPS stuff, just because they were on Macs. Right. And for people that were born in the late 90s, Macs were not a popular computer choice.
No. And also were definitely not seen as a gaming computer choice.
No. But obviously, Marathon became more historically notable later as Bungie went on to make the Halo franchise, which did very much reinvent the wheel. Technology-wise, Marathon is kind of sitting somewhere between like the Doom and Build engine, which was the Duke 3D engine in technical capability. Mm-hmm. But still, impressive games for their time. A lot of people have fond memories of Marathon. Yep. We also need to mention Star Wars Dark Forces, which LucasArts put out in 1995, which does not use any of these engines, but uses a custom engine they called the Jedi engine, which included crouching, jumping, and vertical aiming. So, that was a thing that you could buy as well.
And Dark Forces 2 is fantastic. That's Jedi Knight, and it spawned its own little series. And I believe Jedi Knight 2 uses the Quake 3 engine, if I remember right.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds right. And then you have the best Doom clone, which is Doom 2. Came out in 1995. Wildly successful, just like the previous game. Right. It was the third... Listen to this.
Yeah.
It was the third best-selling PC game in the period between January 1993 and April 1998.
Who defines that period?
I don't know, but I found it, and I was like, "That's 5 fucking years."
Right. That's great that it's the third highest selling game of that 5-year period.
And it wasn't even out for 2 of those years.
But why that
didn't
period?
exist? I don't know why. I don't know
So
why.
weird. Anyway.
But the weirdest part is that it's not even out for 2 of the years. For whatever reason, that period mattered.
My
To
question
whoever
is,
figured this out.
my question is, if we expand that to include December of 92 and May of 98, does it suddenly drop to the 4th best?
It might.
Yeah, that's what I have to know now. Damn it.
And then we enter Duke Nukem 3D.
Yeah.
Developed by 3D Realms, published by FormGen in 1996. Arguably not a Doom clone.
But it was still called one. 100%.
Still, it was a sprite-based shooter, so it gets lumped in there, you know.
I'm questioning what your definition of Doom clone is then, because at the time that was strongly considered Doom clone.
I mean, yes. Yeah. I mean, really, Doom clone is meaningless unless you're talking about something that's using the Wolf or Doom engine.
Yeah, no, that's not what we meant at all at the time. We just meant anything where you didn't see your dude, you moved through their eyes, and you shot at shit.
But
That's Doom clones.
there was a lot more sophistication and interaction in Duke 3D, which differentiates
Yeah,
it,
because you can go up
a
to the
little bit.
poster and he would like scratch himself or something.
You could pee in the toilet.
Yeah, you could pee in the toilet.
Okay.
You could make him say offensive things.
It used the build engine. Several games used the build engine that Duke 3D used. I have a list. It includes Witch Haven, Witch Haven 2, Power Slave, Blood, the first Shadow Warrior, all build engine games. And I don't know that Duke 3D was ever as big as Doom. And by I don't know, I mean I do know it was never as big as Doom. But it still was a very influential sprite-based shooter.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of the capstone on the sprite-based shooter phenomenon.
I see in your notes that you included that Redneck Rampage also used the Duke 3D code, and I feel like you're underplaying Redneck Rampage. It sold
Rampage,
a shitload of copies.
Redneck Rampage Rides Again, Redneck Deer Hunting, Nom, and Extreme Paintball I don't think they used the full build engine, but they did use some Duke 3D code.
Yeah, Redneck Rampage was a bizarrely high-selling game.
It was, but they made so many of them.
Yes. Well, that's how Interplay did business at the time. They would just milk something until nobody wanted it anymore.
So Duke 3D and its related games feel distinctly more modern and a little bit faster than the Doom family of games. They're kind of the capstone to the sprite-based shooters because a year later in 1996 we get Quake. Which lands just after Duke 3D, and then all of a sudden everything's polygons all of the time.
Yeah, that sucks.
I
really want us to go back to sprites, damn it.
It's sprite. Well, I mean, to be fair, boomer shooters are a thing. Sprite-based shooters are coming back.
Oh, I didn't mean in shooters. I just meant in all games.
So Quake was a pretty massive leap in technology.
Oh, yeah.
But it did not take off as fast as Doom and Doom 2 did.
That's because nobody's computer could handle it.
It still did well. It was well received. But in the post-Quake world, polygonal FPS games kind of quickly became the norm, and the continued success of Quake, as well as the Unreal games, which are kind of, the other side of that coin, made up a massive portion of the PC gaming landscape going into the turn of the millennium and kind of a little bit beyond that.
And also, at that time, Quake was the influence that convinced a lot of people I knew to finally upgrade their computers, finally get a dedicated video card. That was the thing that pushed them over that edge. Because it was such a huge leap that so many people's computers just couldn't handle it for a while there. Or they handled it so poorly that it made it look worse than Doom because of how poorly it ran.
So Quake came out not long before GoldenEye 007, which was published by Rare, 1997. In these two games, was Quake 2 a year later?
Let me double check. I feel like it was later than that, but it might have been
later.
It might have been that.
Either way,
it was late 97.
So Quake 2 and GoldenEye are kind of they're redefining first-person shooters in this space. Yeah. In this 1997 area, in this time frame.
Right.
and they're redefining them in two different ways and in two different places. So Quake comes out, people are very impressed, but it's not quite the runaway success Doom was. Quake 2 hits, people love Quake 2. It's a very successful game, and it just kind of keeps ramping up from there. At the same time, GoldenEye comes out on the N64 and kind of serves as a proof of concept for native console FPS games,
Right.
which up to this point were kind of non-existent.
Yeah,
in fact, very possibly not. I mean, you got some ports. You'd get Doom on whatever,
and
but that was it.
Quake 2 was on PS1, and Quake was on N64. So you were getting ports of the bigger ones. Duke Nukem 3D came out on several consoles. But the thing is that there was always this idea that they were lesser. If it was on console, it was not as good as PC first-person shooters, and then you continued to get this group of elitists for at least until Halo released, if not a couple of years after that, that would insist that any FPS on a console was not as good. Even if it was a good game like GoldenEye, it was still not as good as the worst first-person shooter on
and this
PC.
Is where this kind of starts, is the best thing console owners could hope for was a port. Now, to be fair, some of them kind of were native console FPS games, like the Doom 64 is a great example.
Yeah.
But they were the exception, not the norm.
And even then, it felt, even though it was technically a native game and an original game, it still just felt like more of Doom.
Right. GoldenEye featured a ton of different weapons, cheats, additional gameplay elements. You were hacking things, you were shooting watch lasers, and possibly more importantly, it had a very robust story.
Yeah.
Which was something that FPS games just kind of didn't really super have.
Yeah. And it beat Metal Gear to the market. So it kind of felt like one of those early games that was not exclusively for kids.
Yeah. And so it was a highly celebrated, highly successful game. In the long run, leading up to its release, the media was shitting all over it. It had a very poor showing leading up to release, and then it came out, and everyone loved it.
Well, you have to remember, at the time, it was a game based on a movie, which is already not always a great
for
idea.
Disaster.
And it was a movie that had come out, I believe, 2 years earlier at that point. Mm-hmm. So it was not just a game based on a movie; it was a game based on an old movie that people had moved on from, and it was a new kind of genre as far as the N64 was concerned that people were not particularly excited about. And it was a first-person game on a console. So it was all these things lumped together just made a lot of the media cynical, whether they tried it or not. They didn't expect it to do anything.
So this is I feel like GoldenEye and Quake 2 are where we get this big split, right? Which is we're in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah.
And we see console and FPS games kind of splintering into these two sort of different takes on the same genre.
Yeah, we had just said a minute ago that there weren't too many first-person games on console up till GoldenEye, but Turok beat GoldenEye to the market by a few months.
True, but not a lot of people liked it.
Yeah, because it was Turok. I know plenty of people who pretended to like it. Does that count?
I mean, yeah. No, it does not. GoldenEye was the one. GoldenEye was the one that everybody noticed.
Yeah, and then people universally praised.
Were there console FPS games that were native to console before this?
Yeah.
Certainly. None of them were GoldenEye.
Right.
So we get this split. It's not a distinct line in the sand, but for the most part, PC FPS games kind of want to embrace the online competitive crowd as we're careening into the new millennium and high-speed internet.
Yep.
And console FPS games seem much more focused on the local multiplayer, the single-player campaign, the story-based campaign kind of stuff.
Unless you have a Dreamcast modem.
Right, and then you're good for everything.
Yeah.
Console FPS games were pretty much expected, for the most part, to have full single-player campaigns and storylines.
Yeah. And maybe split-screen multiplayer.
And on the flip side, PC FPS games like Quake 3 just came out and was just shooting people.
Yeah.
There's no
real
need
to have a story here. You guys just wanted deathmatch anyway.
There you go. It's good. And so you see this distinct split.
Yeah. And we had Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament at almost the same time. So it's two different studios that both realized, what if we didn't have to make the campaign?
Yeah. And so this is where we kind of have to end things, because suddenly we're talking about sort of two subgenres that have splintered off.
And then eventually remerged.
It's a mess now. It's a tangled mess at this point. But kind of not long after this, you see Halo burst onto the scene in the early 2000s. It turns a lot of things on its head. It very much is the next major step in the defining the console FPS equation, you know? Around the same time it comes out, Counter-Strike is sort of codifying the world of hardcore online FPS players, which is where we're going from like, hey, it's still like a skeleton shooting a laser beam at a zombie, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, no. PC FPS games are serious, they're highly competitive, and require a high degree of skill.
Yeah, and then we ended up not too many years after that with Medal of Honor bringing that to consoles, which granted Halo had already kind of done so. But it was still the fantasy FPS, whereas Medal of Honor brought the more down-to-earth FPS to console.
I mean, in many ways, I said we're not going to get into it, but I'm going to get into it. In many ways, I feel like Halo 2 was as defining a game as Halo 1 was.
Just
because Halo 2...
Live?
Because of Xbox Live. Halo 2 is when it's when I noticed competitive FPS console gaming, or first-person shooters, I should say. Competitive first-person shooters on
I definitely
consoles.
remember there being competitions of both GoldenEye and the first Halo at conventions around here.
True, but there were Halo 2 tournaments like popping off all over my town that I lived in. Like, it was crazy big.
Well, the gaming in general was getting bigger by that point, too, though.
We didn't have any other kind of tournaments. There wasn't anything else happening. There wasn't an arcade. There wasn't a LAN center. I played at a Halo 2
your
tournament.
Your town's also very, very small, though.
I played at a Halo 2 tournament in an old karate studio.
Because I saw plenty of like Street Fighter tournaments in the 90s. That was a thing that I saw.
Sure, but that's not an FPS game. I mean,
I'm just saying
like
that there were tournaments going up to it. And I did see GoldenEye and Halo tournaments at locations in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it did happen.
Certainly. Nowhere even remotely as big as a single percentage of the amount of Halo 2 competitive tournaments.
See, I never encountered any of the Halo 2 tournaments, though. So
Halo 2 was competitively massive.
See, everybody I knew that played that only played it on live. They didn't play anywhere locally.
Yeah. Halo 2 from this, and this is just, now we're fully off. We're off book. Yeah. I've done no research, but my perspective was that Halo 2 did for console FPS games what Counter-Strike did for PC FPS games, which is really kind of solidify it into this highly competitive arena that I was not a part of, but I was looking in the window being like, wow, that's crazy, man. They're having like $10,000 prize tournaments in Halo 2. That's nuts.
I'm going to show my age for a moment and just be the old man here and say that despite all of this and despite being able to know some of the nuance and the difference between these, every FPS from about Quake forward kind of feels the same to me. Like, all of them. I can understand when they have like different genre or different theming or whatever, but like as far as gameplay goes, I struggle to really find the difference.
I don't know, like Halo is where it feels different to me.
Yeah, like I know there is a difference. I just
like maybe there were earlier examples, but all of a sudden Halo is vehicles. It's AI teammates, it's just having recharging health that automatically recharges drastically changes how I play a game. You know, it really does change it into a more kind of tactical scenario than just I'm just going to shoot him and try not to get shot and there's a health pack over there, I hope, or if there isn't, I'm just fucked. But yeah, Halo is where it starts to feel different to me. You know, the Quake and the lineage that came out of Quake, everything between Quake and Halo, there's a lot of, especially on PC, there's a lot of similarities, but Halo is where it feels different to me. And then of course we go into the military shooter era where
everything was brown and gray.
Yeah. Well, you know where else everything is brown and gray? Our Patreon over at patreon.com.
Before we do that,
Warriors.
I do want to real quickly remind everybody that Guy's segment is coming up.
Yeah, guys,
stick
segment's
around
coming up
for that.
Please stay for that.
Yes.
But you should also please go to our Patreon at patreon.com/Retro Warriors. You can get Talking Wizards and Retro Warriors read along, or just give us money because you like us doing the show and you want us to do more shows.
Or
that
you
would
just
be
hate
cool,
money.
right? Or you just hate money and you say, you take it. I don't want it. But we do want to thank the following patrons, starting with Retro Video Game Zone Jason.
And Burger Champ.
Dr. Jason Tharp.
Justin's transitions are now my new favorite part of the show.
Mr. Jiggyfly.
Todd Bass.
Craig C.
Chris Ruppersberg.
Puff Puff Please.
And Neil Hayes.
Are all the patrons we want to thank for their kind contributions. And we want to thank you for hanging out after the end credits themes. I always want to call them credits.
Yeah, there's no credits.
There might be. You just can't see them. It's audio
right. They're
format.
invisible credits.
It's
just Pablo's name over and over again.
Pablo did all of this. Just flying by. Anyway, stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together. Hi, welcome to the after party with Guy, who's hopefully here. Hi, Guy.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
We just finished a show.
I know. I listened. No, I forgot. I totally zoned out on what I was going to say. But
that's fine.
In the credits, I feel like you guys would be with special guests, Saturn and Justin.
Yeah.
And then
Underneath Pablo's name.
Yeah, and then associated acts would be me.
Yeah.
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 Well, you'd
with
be executive
contributions
producer up at the top, right?
Yeah, I could force him, I suppose. I just sit on his head like when we were kids. Fart.
Is that what you did? Was that your older brother tactic? Sit on his head and fart?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't sit like on his head to crush his head. I would just have him pinned down so I could fart in his face, right?
Right. No, my
Right,
issue
that's
with
the
it
older brother thing.
wasn't the sitting anyway. It was the farting directly into his face. Is what it is.
Sometimes brothers are gonna brother. I don't know.
That's aggressive, man. My brother never farted in my face.
But what if you needed to find out if it stank or not?
This is true. You got it. This is data that we need. This is critical information.
No,
Well,
my brother
tell me I have
absolutely. What's that?
I was gonna say, you tell me I have stinky farts, I'm gonna show you. So
Right. my brother absolutely pinned me down and farted on my face several times.
It just feels like you got to know you have a fart coming, then you got to go find the person,
Yeah.
and then you got to hold them down, and the whole time you got to not accidentally let the fart slip. It just seems like a lot of effort. My brother would just like hit me. That's easier. That's always available. It's always an option.
Why do you have to choose one or the other?
Guy, you're old and like video games. What was your perspective on how Halo 2 kind of changed things? Because I'm curious to hear.
Halo 2?
Yes. Or Halo 1. Either one of them. Both of them. Sure.
I mean, I think Halo changed things in the sense that they started making things trying to feel more cinematic and wide open, right?
Yeah.
To the extent that now, like, Halo is an open world like exploration game with no co-op or whatever.
Which they promised me I would get. They promised it to me. I meant more like, because you were older than me when it came out, when the early Halos came out. Well, you're older than me when all the Halos came out because you're older than me.
Yeah.
But
Good job.
but like how it changed as far as like audience, people noticing first person shooters, playing first person shooters. Did you see more people that like, hey, these aren't the kind of people that are going to go play Quake 3 Arena, but they're all playing Halo?
I would say that I noticed the base of gamers expanded significantly.
Yeah.
Right.
The normies.
Right, the normies, with the rise of like sports games getting more realistic with that generation, and first-person shooters turning what they turned into, all of a sudden the market became broad, and that was sort of the start of the beginning of like nerd culture coming to the forefront.
Right, and
yeah.
The other thing to remember about that era, when we look back on it, the original Xbox sold what 1/6 what the PS2 sold.
I thought you were just gonna say 1 to 6.
Yeah, it's so like 1 to 6 units total over its life. It was like 1/6 of the units that the PS2 sold, and so no matter how big any game on the Xbox was, it was hard for it to compete with some of the biggest games on PS2, which is why I'd mentioned Medal of Honor a couple times, because working at a game store at the time, that was the one that people with PS2s went after. They were like, well, I can't get Halo because I don't have an Xbox, but this is as close as I'm going to get for some reason.
I did find it weird you kept mentioning Medal of Honor, and I was like, that not Call of Duty game?
Oh, this was pre-Call of Duty.
I feel like that's...
when was Call of Duty 1? What year was that? It was 2003.
It was after I
wasn't it?
stopped working at a game store is when Call of Duty 1 was.
Gosh. See, I played both of those franchises after the fact, so they were...
looks like the first... Actually, no, I'm sorry. The first Call of Duty came out on PC when I was still working there, so it was 2003. But it was not released on any consoles yet at that point.
I was about to say that, like, I also think that coincides with consoles powerful enough to do PC, first-person shooters, right?
Yeah.
So you had it was just kind of all these things mixed together that just exploded in popularity, really, and changed everything, because there was like, oh, well, it was Halo that did it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But no.
Yeah, because the first Call of Duties never made it to console until the Xbox 360 and the PS3.
360 was because it was launched on 360.
Yeah,
one of the Call of Duties. I don't remember which one. It was. I think it was either Big Red 1 or it was 3.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Medal of Honor games were on PS2. They were on Xbox. They were on GameCube.
I played them on GameCube.
Yeah. Frontline specifically was the big one that got people's attention, because it was one of the first big high-selling first-person games post Halo.
God, I played so much Frontline on my GameCube.
Yeah.
Dude, I played so much like Star Wars Battlefront 2. Like in land mode. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Man, the fucking early aughts were like the pinnacle of land days for me. Like I was in college, And so we'd have like just like 10 dudes stuck in like a 2-room apartment just for a weekend or a week or, a month sometimes. Right.
10 years.
Right. Aren't we all supposed to go to class? So sometimes we'd take breaks and go to class,
Right.
Sometimes.
I played a bunch of Battlefront, but it was always by myself because I didn't have anybody to play with. And I was like, man, this would be so much fun if I had some friends. And I didn't. So, yeah. But I played a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's a good game.
Yeah, it's a real good game.
Yeah.
Party.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you actually have for us this month?
Steamroll me with like what's a
Video game
first-person
questions?
shooter?
Well, I was just curious because I know you don't like mainline FPS games, but like I know you play them and probably played them back then. I was curious to get your perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean I'll check one out every 2 or 3 a year, I would think, at least. What Saturn would call a Doom clone, if like Elden Ring, right?
Yeah, one of them Elden Ring, one of them Doom clones.
Yeah, that Doom clone Sekiro that came out a few years ago. Yeah, it is.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it is. Whoops. My bad.
Yeah, if we were talking third person, SOCOM would have been in the mix.
Yeah.
SOCOM was big for
definitely.
like a minute.
Yeah. Poor
Most
SOCOM.
definitely. It did it to itself.
Yeah,
So,
it did.
It tried though. It tried.
Right.
It
It did.
did it.
For a minute. It tried for a minute.
I saw a commercial or two, so yeah, it tried.
So what do you actually have for us?
I had a party, and then I just
did,
made a
yes.
Justin noise. Sorry.
Yep.
Too much Justin exposure.
I suppose so. We had a party because I got married in the summer, and we decided that having a wedding and a party on the same day was an awful idea.
That's a good call. I'm with you.
Yeah, it was really fun. A bunch of people came out. Y'all came out.
Yep.
I had family from all over. We had karaoke.
Yep.
I did the
I think
karaoke.
Saturn missed the karaoke entirely.
I saw the guy. He sang the one song. The DJ sang a song.
Oh, and then Saturn was like, I have to fucking leave.
No,
now.
I needed to leave just because I was already getting tired because I'm old. But no,
That's all right.
I didn't.
You
I
missed the
didn't
worst karaoke, man. Like,
Oh, yeah?
I don't know. I have an
how-
okay singing voice. I need people to know.
Sure
this.
you do.
So,
sure you
so
do.
let me ask you this, because I spent a bit of time at karaoke bars back in the day. How many people, or did at least one person anyway, sing "Hurt" by 9 Inch Nails or Johnny Cash, and did at least one person sing "Loser" by Radiohead?
No and no, actually.
Weird.
Yeah,
Weird.
it was a cool audience. That's why.
It was a very eclectic lineup of songs.
Yeah, it was. It was fun. You know, a lot of kids joined in and stuff. But no. Okay, let's go back. We kicked it off with me and Kristen singing like the Elephant Love medley from Moulin Rouge.
Yeah.
It was so bad, dude. It was my first time karaoke like ever, right? I was nervous
Nice.
as all shit.
No.
Yeah.
And I could hear myself, which is fine. I'm used to it, right? Like,
It's a good song, too.
yeah. Well, I don't know. Everything came out like way flat and in a lower, like a completely lower octave than what I was aiming for.
I suspect I know what the problem was because I was there for a lot of the karaoke. Is that the guy had the mic turned up way too loud and the music was way too low. So the second people hear their voices, they're trying to like sing more quietly, and it makes you sing like shit, and you're just hyper aware of how you sound.
That sucks.
You know,
Yeah, that may have been it. But
because I
either
feel
way,
like good
that was my
karaoke,
experience.
kind of it drowns you out a little bit. You know. To kind of soften the blow of untrained singing voices. And this was like, no, man, you better be front and center and know how to use that microphone because otherwise we're all going to hear everything.
Yeah. No, it was terrifying and awful, and I hated every second of it. But like 3 days later, I'm like, yeah, it was pretty fun, actually.
Well, see, the thing you have to remember about karaoke is it's not about singing well. It's about enjoying
Clearly.
yourself with friends or family or whoever.
Yeah, and I had a good time, and it was fun. And
That's good.
I don't want to shit on the idea of karaoke at my own wedding reception. It was fun, right? But, dude, we went all out, too. We got, like, this bounce house.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was a pretty impressive bounce. It kept deflating, though.
Oh, did it?
Yeah. Like, I kept looking over, and it was partially
there's like
deflated
kids
again.
piling out of it and it was falling over.
Oh, no. Somebody must actually unplugged it. That's awesome. I didn't even notice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Like, it also had, like, a water hose hookup. We could have turned it into a water slide.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Right?
You also had, like, premier executive porta potties, and that was
Oh, my
exciting.
God. The porta potties were, like, my favorite part of the fucking party.
Calling them porta potties feels like a disservice
Right?
to these trailer potties, which is what they were. They were bright. It was a big like camper trailer full of toilets.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was 4 toilets on like you said, on a camper trailer with, like, individual doors, individual
Like running water and lights and fans and
air conditioning.
right? It was nice.
Yeah. Like some sort of, like, air scent pumped in.
Right?
Saturn said he pulled up and saw the porta potty out front because they're still working on your house, and he was like, "Oh, is that like one porta potty for 50 people in the beating sun?
Yeah.
There you go, all the way on the other end of the property."
I also
See,
like that, like, Kristen put the more parking sign right in front of that porta potty, implying that you should park in the porta potty.
Well, yeah, you know, if you gotta. I'm gonna park my ass in there.
I laughed
Yeah.
about that for a long time too.
They were very nice toilets.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
don't
were. They were
remember
fancy.
where we rented them from, but, like, if you're gonna throw a party for people and you need restroom accommodations,
Right.
look into renting a trailer. It's amazing. All
Seriously.
you need is, like, 2 electrical hookups and a water hookup.
Nice.
I'll never
spent
not
most-
do that.
I spent most of the wedding talking to your kid.
Yeah.
And he was like, he's sitting there and looking at all the stuff that y'all had like rented for this nice party.
Right.
And he's going, "You think they bought this? You think like after it's over, this is just what our yard is going to look like?" I was like, "I don't think so, dude. I think they rented all this."
I don't think you're keeping the potty trailer.
And then your kid didn't bring his Digimon, so we couldn't have a Digimon battle.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I loved that. The
forgot.
moment that he first walked up to you and you were like, "Did you bring it?" And he was like, "No." The look on your face.
Cannot believe it.
Oh, Uncle Pablo fixed his Digimon.
That's good.
Oh, that's good.
What was wrong with
Yeah.
it?
I don't know. I assume some contact, like, got corroded when it got wet.
Yeah, I got wet, and he was
Wow.
telling me about it, and I was like, "Well, if you bring it, I can probably fix that. Probably just needs to get clean." And he was like, "When am I going to see you next?" And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know it was going to be this major of an issue. Soon, I guess."
Should have been
Yeah.
prepared for that question.
Yeah, since he
I'm
got it
glad.
fixed, he's completely abandoned his, like, Digimon X or whatever.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's preferring the DM20 to the DMX.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like the roster and availability of the DM20, but DMX is a lot of fun. It's more of a focused experience, you know?
Yeah, I think he likes the fact that they evolve while they're sleeping, because they sleep a lot.
Yeah. Well, they don't on the DM20. They do on the DMX.
Nah, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue with you about what my kid said, but like, it seems to him that it takes longer for his Digimon on the DMX to evolve than it did on the yellow one.
Well, that's possible. It may take longer, depending on many different variables. But the DM20, they do not evolve when they're sleeping. The evolution timer is paused entirely.
Well, then maybe they just wake up a lot, and he's not good at like putting him back to sleep. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, so here's the thing. On the DM20, it's a very rigid evolution structure. They're going to evolve at very specific intervals. The DMX, you can have different. They can evolve for different reasons other than just time.
Yeah.
So it might be that, where he's not meeting whatever criteria.
The different eggs and shit.
Oh yeah, me too. I mean, DM20 is a great device, right, Saturn? Yep.
Yeah,
you got it.
Oh,
I was under the impression that DMX was a musician and entertainer.
No, he's a Digimon.
Oh, okay, got it.
So this all rounds out to the point that, like, at one point, my ex-wife was there, and she says, "Oh, does Max know those people over there at that table?" And I look over, and he's, talking to you and well, really just you, but he's over there with like Saturn and some other people. And I was like, yeah. That tall guy with the mustache is a dude that I record the podcast with, along with the dude in the blue shirt. Oh. And she goes, "Wait, which guy?" And then I went, "The one that your son is lovingly gazing at while he slowly eats his food." And she goes, "Oh yeah, okay."
Yeah, we talked about Digimon for a while, and then we talked about Minecraft for a while.
Yeah,
it's good. He's real into Justin. He's excited. He's excited every time he sees you now.
Yeah. Well, it's the adult he can talk with.
Right.
There you go. It's easier than talking to other adults. Are just like, "Where do you live? So where are you working?" See, this is lame. Tell me about Digimon.
When he talks to Justin, it's like he suddenly knows adult things because this adult is on the same wavelength as him.
My daughter makes fun of adults talking. Like she'll mock them, and it's just her going, "Oh well, I was just thinking, it's
that's pretty accurate.
Whatever." It's like if you've ever done the autofill on your phone keyboard where you don't put in an initial word and you just tap and it's just like yes and then and yes and then and yes and then. It's like that.
Nice.
And I was like, "That's what adults sound like to you?" And she's like, "Yeah, mostly just really boring stuff." So, which it's not wrong.
It's not wrong.
I started occasionally watching the 9 p.m. newscast when I was like 8 or 9. Actually, I'm trying to do math now. It must have been 9 or 10 because they were already starting to talk about the 92 election. And so I had learned who Ross Perot was, and the next time I went to my grandparents' house, I was telling them all about how dumb Ross Perot looked and how dumb he talked and how all of his ideas sounded dumb. And suddenly my grandparents thought I was just the smartest young man. And so like they would like sit down and talk to me about politics, and I would just try to absorb all this. And I didn't understand half of what they were saying, but I wanted to absorb as much as I could because an old person was talking to me as if I was an old person.
TV.
Right, yeah. And like I would do an impersonation of him by pulling my ears out and like nasaling my voice, and they're like, "Oh, that is Ross Perot." So yeah, it was like my earliest opportunity to like feel like I was fitting in with the adults. So I can understand how your son feels there, Guy.
Yeah, there you go. Saturn needs to go to bed.
All right, fine.
So
like 2 hours ago.
We should probably wrap this up. But Guy, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming to my party.
Thanks for the fun party.
That was also super great.
It meant a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.